Pleasure to have our friend Douglas Murray on the program, who is a remarkable man, actually. He's been to Ukraine during the fighting, been to Israel during the fighting right after October 7th. You've known him since before the Ukraine and the Russia war and before what took place on October 7th. He's got a fantastic new book out on Democracies and Death Cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. Welcome to the program, Douglas. So tell us why you decided to write this book.
Well, it's great to be with you and your listeners, Mark. It really started because I was in New York on October the 7th, in my home there, and started to receive the news from Israel of the thousands of rockets and then the hundreds and hundreds of reports of the murders, the casualties, the rapes. And the next day I went down to Times Square in New York. And in Times Square, there was already a protest in support of the attacks. There they were in the center of the city, people by the hundreds flying signs and banners saying things like, by all means necessary, by any means necessary. There were people waving self-made banners and prepared banners which were saying what a glorious day the 7th of October had been. And we already knew that the massacres were still going on. The fighting was still going on in the south of Israel. And I thought, there are two things happening. One is, I want to go as soon as I can and see what has happened and record what has happened and to report back, and also to report back on the war that I knew already would be coming. And the second thing was that it persuaded me that there was something very bad happening in our society here in America, something terrible that meant that in the very moment when our friends in a fellow democracy, in a society which is so like ours, were raped, murdered, butchered, so many people in America already by the 7th and 8th of October were on the side of the death cult, were on the side of Hamas. And so the book really is about these two things. One is the war that Hamas started and the repercussions of it and the consequences of it, which I've seen myself in Gaza and Lebanon and elsewhere. But also, what is it that has happened in our own society, here in America, here in the West, that so many people seem to find it hard in a fight between a democracy and a death cult to side with a democracy?
This is a killer book, folks. It's on Democracies and Death Cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. So what did you conclude, generally? I mean, it's insane to watch a civilized society become uncivil, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And one of the many things, of course, is that, I mean, I think it's extraordinary to see, particularly I think of the students in America, when they've seen their contemporaries at a dance party, for instance, at a dance party in the desert, being raped, butchered, murdered, chased across fields and mown down with machine guns by Hamas. Amazing to think that so many students and other young people in America, particularly, not only young people, but particularly young people in America, would think that those people carrying out the attacks were the people they wanted to support, rather than their fellow students who were victims. You know, the Ayatollah Khamenei in Tehran, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Government, sent a letter last year to thank American students for being on their side and the side of Hamas. I think a lot of things have gone very badly wrong. One thing I suggest, which I think it follows on from my last book, The War on the West, is that so many people in America, young people in particular, have been told that our society is rotten, that our society in America is a colonialist society, a white supremacist society, a society that's committed genocide and all these sorts of things. And I said in my last book that this was an unresolvable conundrum for young people in America, to be told they were guilty of things that they have not done, which I would also argue, by the way, in many of these cases, America never did. But they have told that they are guilty for things they never did. And there's no way out of that, because nobody is alive who did any of these things, and nobody is alive who's dead in the case of the American past. Nobody is alive who's the guilty party or the person who who the sin is meant to have been done to. But what I think we've seen in the last 18 months with this eruption of not just anti-Semitism, but anti-Westernism and anti-Americanism, because that's what it is. None of the people protesting against Israel ever fly an American flag. They never sing the American national anthem. They burn the American flag just as they burn the Israeli flag. But many of these people believe that they can carry out the effective sort of making up for the sins they've been told they're guilty of by attacking the Jewish state for these very crimes, by lying about Israel just as America has been lied about, by lying that Israel is guilty of genocide. And they've been saying that since the moment Hamas attacked, that Israel is the one committing genocide, they say, that Israel is committing ethnic cleansing, that Israel, an incredibly diverse country, is white supremacist and racist. All of these things are things that people have been taught among particularly elites in America in recent years. And I believe this has created an absolutely toxic mindset that now is absolutely impossible to divorce from the mindset of a death cult like Hamas. But the good news is they've been taught into it, which means they can be taught out of it.
Well, let me ask you about that. I've been talking about Iran. The president says they should never get a nuclear weapon. I agree with that 100%. I mean, after all, they say what they'll do with it.
Yeah.
Eventually. And they are an Islamo-Nazi regime. They murder their own people, and they're murdering other people, and they've murdered American soldiers. So when we talk about they're not going to get a weapon, and if these talks fail, and most of them do with this regime, that they need to be taken out. When I do that, Douglas, the response on the internet is, I'm a Jew, or I'm Israel first. I don't even bring up Israel. I bring up intercontinental ballistic missiles with warheads that can blow our country off the face of the earth. And I say, you're worried about forever wars? That war will be the shortest war in the history of mankind, because we don't have an Iron Dome in this country the way they do in Israel. What do you make of that kind of response?
It's amazing, you know. I mean, I have this rule that I've been trying to popularize in this book on Democracies and Death Cults, which is whatever people accuse the Jews of, they're guilty of themselves. And the most obvious one is this one where young Americans think they're guilty of things that they accuse Israel of. But the most striking one is these anti-colonialists. The regime in Iran says that Israel is a colonizing power. But the country that is a real colonizing power across the Middle East is the revolutionary government in Iran, that since 1979 has been knighted a very distinguished civilization there in Persia. And since 1979, the mullahs have not just been colonialists in Iran. They've colonized Iraq, they've colonized Syria, they've colonized Lebanon, they've colonized Yemen. And as I always say, if you like the way that the Iranian revolutionary governments behaved without an atomic bomb, you'll love how they behave with one. They say repeatedly that Israel is the little Satan, that America is the great Satan. They all attack Israel first, but America next.
We're here with Douglas Murray, who's written a fantastic book on Democracies and Death Cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. So, Douglas Murray, let me ask you, what about Israel and the future of civilization? What does Israel's future look like and the future of civilization?
Well, I see the two as being very intertwined, and I'll tell you briefly why. The young people in Israel, much like young people in America and the rest of the West, there's often criticism of them. They're said to be on Instagram, they're said to be on TikTok all the time, and to have grown weak and liberal and much more. And if you look at the polls that ask young people in America and Britain and other countries whether they'd fight for their country if it was invaded like Ukraine was in 22 or like Israel was in 2023, sadly, a minority of people say they actually would fight for their country. And there's an interesting thing I've learned in the last year and a half of covering the war in Israel, which is that many older Israelis thought the younger generation didn't have it in them. And I've spent most of the last year and a half embedded with the IDF in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Israel, and everywhere else, speaking to victims as well. But But the crucial thing is, I've seen the way in which a generation can rise to the challenge, can rise to an existential threat. And even people that weren't expected to, perhaps especially the people that weren't expected to, have been put through a time of unbelievable trial and have found themselves to be magnificent, to have found that they are able to fight for their civilization, for their faith, for their countries, for their communities, and much more. And I think that as well as the death cult ideology, which I look into in this book, the people who literally worship death, like the mullahs in Tehran, like Hassan Nasrallah, who now has got what he wanted, those people worship death. But on the other side are those people who actually value life. And I've seen the IDF, I've seen the young generation of Israelis, having stared into the face of these death cults, having seen what they're capable of, the barbarism, the horror, they've stared into the face of that death cult, and they've shown that you can defeat it. And I think there are so many lessons, some practical, but some very, very deep, that all of us can learn from this. Because we're very lucky in America. We don't face likely land invasion. But that doesn't mean that there aren't these threats by these people, these groups, these governments out there against us as well. And I think that, among other things, we have been through a period in the West where we've venerated victimhood. We've celebrated victimhood. We've made an absolute fetish of victimhood, and that the most victimized person, the person who can say they're most oppressed, is the person we should listen to the most. And the young generation in Israel has shown something else, which is what can happen if your society orients itself again towards courage and towards heroism. And I think that most young Americans, actually, if you strip away the rest of it, they are absolutely able to be orientated in a good way as well. And that there's no reason to give up on the cause of civilization despite the challenges which we see.
Mm-hmm. Very, very good. In these universities and colleges, I think President Trump and his people are handling this right, defunding them,
yes.
Trying to round up the main agitators and so forth. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. It just goes to show, doesn't it, what can happen if you have a bit of political leadership. Mm-hmm. There's no reason why on the 8th of October, 2023, President Biden couldn't have gone to Qatar and say, you make your friends in Hamas give over all the hostages, including the American hostages that you're holding, and you give them over now or else. History would have been very different if that had have happened, but that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. It's the same with the people in the streets of American cities, and it's not just college campuses. Last night, Grand Central Station in New York shut down by a pro-Hamas mob, a pro-terror mob. These are people, of course, they're such cowards as well as being so wicked. They're such cowards. They simultaneously cover themselves in their kafirs and their terrorist chic and also wear COVID masks because obviously they're very scared of the COVID-19 variants. I'm sure we can all agree. Yeah. But these cowards, these cowards, they have been not only at American college campuses, but they've been on American streets. Last year, there was a recreation of the Nova Party festival that came to American cities. And in one American city, there was a father who'd lost his daughter at that festival, but he was there to open the commemoration. He walked out into the street, into a mob that was chanting support for Hamas on American streets. This is so clear to me, and I think it should be so clear to Americans. This could all have been shut down. There is no need to import more people who support the death cults. There is no need to encourage people into a generation that believes that Hamas is some kind of liberationist organization. And if our colleges didn't teach this rubbish and this rot, and if our political leaders and others hadn't put up with it so long and had countered it, if the adults had been in the room, much of this would not have happened in America. And it's a very good thing that it's starting to stop now. And
and by the way, the book is on Democracies and Death Cults, Israel, in the Future of Civilization, Douglas Murray. And no matter how long I have him here, it's not the same as reading the book, which is much more involved. And it's very, very compelling. You're a very compelling storyteller. I mean, nonfiction storyteller about what's taken place and so forth. And let me ask you this. I was curious. Do you ever get many threats or anything of that sort?
I'm sure I do, but I don't take any notice of it.
Right.
I don't like whining and carping. And when I see young men and women actually on the front lines, actually having to fight and risk their lives, I think that it's ridiculous for me to in any way complain about any pushback I get. I have to say, much more than any pushback, I see enormous support, because I see in America in particular many people who are fed up with what we've been made to put through to go through in recent years, and they want to be on the side of the good, and they want to be on the side of the right, and they don't want to be on the side of the people who want to destroy our civilization. And it's worth just remembering the groups like the one at Columbia that everyone has been talking about, their stated aim is not just the destruction of Israel. It is, quote, the complete destruction of Western civilization. Very well, game on. I want to see them lose.
Amen. All right, folks, the book is On Democracies and Death Cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. You can hear how compelling Douglas is in his book. And you can get it at Amazon.com right now. Any major bookstore has it at this point. It's right off the printing presses. And Douglas Murray, I want to thank you for this book. Thank you for everything you do and everything I know you're going to do. God bless you, my friend.
And you, Mark. Thank you.
Be well. Be well. He is the real deal.